Yesterday, Elon Musk had a really interesting chat with the folks at the All In podcast event. He, I guess, is all in on a whole bunch of different topics. But today, I just want to touch on what he thinks is the most important part that differentiates Tesla from the competitors. Let's take a look. And for those of you interested in investing, check out WeBull, an amazing platform for buying and selling stocks, and now cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and others. Open an account and get a free stock valued at up to $200, and fund your account and get another free stock valued at up to $1,600. Check out the link in the description and help the channel at the same time. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All, so I'm going to keep this video relatively short because I have a bunch of things to do, including an interview with Joe Justice and Farzad Mesbahi this afternoon, so I'm super pumped about both of those. The Joe Justice one will be on my channel, so definitely subscribe because it'll probably be coming out tomorrow, hopefully. And the one with Farzad will be on his channel, so check that one out as well. All right, so I'm going to leave a link to the full hour-and-a-half podcast. It's actually a video on YouTube down in the description, so you can check it out yourself. There's a ton of really good stuff. He starts out on Twitter, and it's a really, really amazing and very, very informative discussion about Twitter. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what Elon is doing. One of the really interesting revelations was, and you can say this if you want to, but he says he's not positive that he's ever voted Republican in his life in United States elections. So, for all the people on the far left who are like, oh, he's trying to create a right conspiracy, that's an interesting data point. Now, of course, you have to believe him because, of course, it's all private, but we have no real reason not to believe him in this circumstance. But anyway, it's a really interesting data point in this, him saying that he's a moderate and he's trying to rebalance things. So anyway, just watch the video. You can make up your own mind about that. What I want to talk about in particular is the AI software and hardware part of the conversation that started around 16 minutes and 50 seconds into the video. I'm going to play a clip that's about 3 minutes long and then talk about it. So let's take a look at the clip first.
And then Tesla is as much a software company as it is a hardware company. So the software that runs in Tesla operates the car, operates the screen, does the charging. All of that stuff is developed by Tesla. And so we have sort of a Tesla OS in the car. I could go on for a long time. And then very importantly, Tesla has built an autopilot AI team from scratch. That is the best real-world AI team on Earth. And if anyone else has got a better one, I'd like to see it demonstrated in a car. The full self-driving beta at this point can very often take you with zero interventions across the Bay Area from San Jose to Marin. So through complex traffic, it's really quite sophisticated. And I invite anyone to join the beta or look at the videos of those who are in the beta. We've got like 100,000 people in the beta, so it's not tiny. And we'll be expanding that to, I don't know, probably a million people or a million, I don't know, so on that order by the end of the year.
You had this slide.
And we also built a chip team because there wasn't hardware that we could run the friggin' AI on. We couldn't just fill the trunk with a whole bunch of GPUs. Because they would have taken a trunk full of GPUs that would have been very expensive and take massive amount of power and cooling just to be able to do what the Tesla designed full self-driving computer can do. So, and we started a chip team from scratch, designed it. It was the best in the world and still is the best in the world several years later. And we're also then we're designing a Dojo supercomputer to be able to process all the video that's coming in from billions of miles of data, because just sort of like the way that it's very difficult to compete with Google because they have so much data and they have all this people doing searches all the time and humanity is training it. But the same is true of Tesla. You really need billions of miles and ultimately tens of billions of miles of training data combined with a sort of a vast training computer and then optimize inference hardware in the car. And state-of-the-art AI and training and specialized software across the board to be able to achieve a full self-driving solution.
So I think the number one takeaway you probably noticed was that Tesla is planning on getting to around 1 million users by the end of the year for their full self-driving beta. For reference, they're currently at somewhere around 100,000. Of course, these are all sort of order of magnitude numbers. So that means they need to 10x the number of users in about 7 months to get to that number by the end of the year. Now, I don't know, he doesn't specify exactly where, and it's a shame. If I was there, I would have asked that follow-up question, but it's unclear whether he means only in the United States, in North America, including Canada, possibly Mexico, also possibly the European Union as well. He's talked about all of those as possible places where full self-driving could be implemented. Of course, there is I don't know how big it is, but in Canada, there are a number of people who are full self-driving testing currently. So certainly just within the North American region of the United States and Canada, he could get to 1 million users driving full self-driving beta, of course. But he's also talked about wanting to start rolling it out in Europe as well. So there's a reasonable possibility he's talking about Europe as well. So he's saying that the United States, Canada, and Europe would constitute the 1 million users in that case. So I don't know. He's not very specific about that, but for people in Europe in particular, maybe you can start to hold out hope. I'm sure a lot of this has to do with regulatory approval. If you watch my video about him talking to the head of the EU Commission on the Internal Market, there's a big new software act that should allow Tesla's full self-driving beta hopefully to be allowed in the European market. So that's all really positive news. So my guess would be it will be expanded in the United States, it'll be expanded in Canada, and they are going to attempt to at least begin to do full self-driving beta in Europe. Now, it may be in countries that are more friendly to full self-driving beta, like I believe that France is a much more friendly country in terms of allowing this than Germany, for example. So it might not be the EU as an entire umbrella entity, it might just be pieces of the EU at a time. But anyway, hopefully that 1 million number means that we will be expanding the full self-driving into Europe. So all of my European friends will have a chance to start using it and to goggle at how good this thing really is. But the primary thing that Elon was really talking about in this clip was what differentiates Tesla from everyone else and how they're multiple startups. And one of the interesting things that people don't give enough credit to is not the AI part of the programming, but there's what he was calling the Tesla OS. I've started calling it that too, but now I guess I have official approval to call it that. I don't actually know if they really have a name because he sort of threw that out there. He said, I guess you could call it the Tesla OS, but let's just call it that. But what that is not the exciting, sexy, full self-driving beta stuff, but it's all the things, it's an electric car, so it's really a computer on wheels. So it's got to understand when you push the accelerator pedal, what actually happens, right? It's got to say like how the motor spins up from a dead stop, or if you're going 40 miles an hour, or if you're decelerating, how does it switch over to regen mode? All of that stuff has to be managed. The battery management system has to be managed so that the batteries charge properly and discharge properly. You've got to have an interface with the users in terms of the screen and also in terms of like force feedback and stuff. So there are a huge number of components that make up this Tesla OS that makes the car actually operate and make it fun to drive. That sort of thing is all sort of, invisible if it works right. I've done in the past an awful lot of sound design, and I call it sort of the invisible art as well. It's like if it's working properly, nobody even notices. They only really notice when it doesn't work. So what you sort of notice as a driver or interacting with the Tesla screen, like interacting with it and saying like, I want to bring up movies or something. And I will say it's very, very slow to bring up like the entertainment thing or something like that. So I do notice the glitches in it, and when it doesn't work properly, what you don't notice is the fact that every time you press the accelerator, it just goes when it takes off, and it figures out how to get the electricity out of the battery into the motors, how to spin up the motors properly. That's really, really complicated. It requires a lot of software to do that because of the nature of the motors themselves. And then of course, like the navigation interface and all of that stuff that's displaying to the screen, and the force feedback, like jiggling the steering wheel or giving you an alert if something's going wrong. All of that stuff is going on under the hood. This is not something that somebody else made. This is something that Tesla made. And if you go out to other car manufacturers, VW, I'm looking at you, they have suppliers that supply this stuff. So they're not building it themselves, which causes all sorts of problems in terms of agility, which I'm going to be talking with Joe Justice about this afternoon. So anyway, you get the sense that Tesla sort of by force had to do this on their own. It wasn't like, he said they didn't really necessarily want to be. Right before the clip that I showed you, if you back it up to like around 15.5 minutes. He talks about how they don't really want to be vertically integrated in a like religious way. Like they're not zealots about vertical integration. It's just that they couldn't get what they wanted without vertically integrating. They couldn't get the speed and the agility. And so what you're seeing is that by building your own OS and integrating the hardware and software and building your own hardware, he talks about hardware 3 and how they built that 3 years ago and how it's still the best thing out there and how otherwise you'd have to have a whole rack of GPUs hiding in the trunk, and cooled and all of that stuff and dealing with all the power issues. But all of these things were born of necessity. They weren't things where they're just like, yeah, we're going to be vertically integrated. It was like, we can't do what we want to do. We can't accomplish our mission without being vertically integrated. So this hardware software marriage is sort of born out of necessity, but it's got really amazing outcomes because of that. And then of course, Elon has to brag on his AI team. He says they're the best AI team on the planet. And he says, if you want to fight me about that, then show me who's better. So I don't personally know anybody who's got a better AI team. So if you do, you can let me know in the comments, I guess. And I think he's right. I think what they're accomplishing is absolutely stunning. And I can't, of course, wait for 10.12 to come out. Hopefully it'll come out. It's been promised for like 2 months now, I think, and 10.12 was going to come out. So eventually we'll see it. And I'll do a release notes video on that, of course. But in the meantime, the AI team is just a bunch of crackerjack people. It's a relatively small team, which keeps it super, super agile and light. And when you have, 30 of the best people, that is better than thousands of the mediocre people. But then, as I said, Elon goes on to talk about hardware and how they had to actually make their own hardware for hardware 3. And FYI, this is a really interesting little thing. He you could see his brain sort of going that way, and he decided not to talk about it. But of course, we know that there is a hardware 4 version that's out there. And I've heard from little birdies who might happen to know that, of course, they're working on a hardware 5 or whatever they're going to call it. And I'm actually wondering, with the chip shortage and all of the delays, whether Tesla might actually consider skipping what was hardware 4 and moving directly to hardware 5. It depends on where it is in the development process. Making these things is a 3 to 5 year sort of process. It's not something that you just knock it out instantly. So it might not be ready for prime time by the time they need it. Currently, I believe that the first product that's being planned to have hardware 4 in it in mass scale is the Cybertruck, although I certainly imagine that TeslaBot will also have hardware 4 in it. It would make complete sense that that would be the case. But anyway, they've got this hardware that they've built and they're building new ones, right? It's not like they've just been like, yep, that's good enough. We'll never do another one again. They're currently working on multiple generations out from where they are right now. And then of course, we've got Dojo, which Elon talked about specifically. He said, we've got Dojo, we've got this hardware system that we're building, this gigantic supercomputer, and we've got tens of billions of miles of data. And he's like, nobody else can compete because we've got this data moat. He compared it to Google, which I think is a pretty reasonable comparison. You've got Google, which has the search domination because everybody uses it, which means that everybody's basically feeding it data and training it. Because if I do a Google search and I scroll down to like the 10th entry before I click it, that teaches Google something. It's like, oh, the top 9 things that I gave this person were not what he was looking for. So I'm going to have to like figure out why that's not right. So that sort of automatic training is brilliant for Google and allows them to maintain this lead because they've got what's called a data moat. And you see the same thing with Tesla. Tesla has a data moat. It's got tens of billions of miles all around the planet of people driving. And so that gives them the opportunity, assuming that they can ingest all of this data, process it properly, label it properly in a semi-autonomous manner, and then train on it relatively quickly. All of those things give Tesla this massive advantage in terms of being able to have a better AI solution than everybody else, assuming that they have a good team, and they just so happen to have a good hardware and software team. So that's my take on that tiny little section of this hour-and-a-half interview. The one other thing I want to kind of bring up is that Elon talks about starting Tesla and how they started it with just a piece of paper and how he and JB Straubel should have just started it on their own instead of tag teaming with another group of people. It's a very interesting story. It starts around 33 minutes. He actually said it was a morally wrong decision. It's really interesting insight into Elon's brain when he thinks that a business decision was morally wrong. So I don't know. I just find that fascinating. I don't know what to make of that specifically. So I'll just leave it out there. He was the one that said that. I think it's fascinating that, normally we think like, oh, I hurt that person. That was a morally wrong decision. He's saying I made a bad business decision. That was morally wrong. And that kind of indicates, I don't know, I'll give you my little take on this. It indicates to me that he thinks about his businesses as humanity, life-changing kind of things. So the morally wrong part was that it slowed Tesla down and almost put them out of business on several occasions. And that was the moral badness, I think. That's just my sort of take on the thing. And that's why he thinks of business as sort of a moral imperative almost. I guess that would be the insight I'm getting out of this. So anyway, that's just a little piece of the giant puzzle. I hope you found it interesting and thought-provoking. If you did, please do like this video because that's how YouTube's AI algorithm works. And of course, consider subscribing for more of this kind of content, including my talk with Joe Justice, which should be out tomorrow. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons on Patreon. Thank you all so much. I couldn't do this without you, really and truly. So I very much appreciate it. And of course, if you want to join the team and help support the channel, just check out the link in the description. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, Success is a Possible Outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on. So check it out. And for those of you interested in investing, check out WeBull, an amazing platform for buying and selling stocks, and now cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and others. Open an account and get a free stock valued at up to $200, and fund your account and get another free stock valued at up to $1,600. Check out the link in the description and help the channel at the same time. Thank you. And finally, don't forget we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a solar roof, a Powerwall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.